Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to begin in John's 15th chapter. This is the midpoint of what is known as the Upper Room Discourse, so named in reference to the location in which it was delivered. So between the Last Supper and the crucifixion, the Savior delivered a farewell address of sorts, and it was not in a sermon format, but in the 14th chapter we read that it was a dialogue, and many of the answers he provides are prompted by questions which the apostles in attendance had. And the doctrine of union is highlighted in the passage we're going to cover today. By that, which translates into, in order to attain union or unity with divinity, we must abide in him through faith. And inasmuch as a branch receives the totality of its physical sustenance and nutrients from the vine it's attached to, so too does the Savior as the supreme source of our spiritual life. All things that we can claim and have and possess belong in him too similarly. So the opening verse reads, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener." As the gardener, he would have had an affectionate involvement in investment with the welfare and the health and the fruitfulness of his vine. So we just want to understand the dynamics of that relationship. The Father is tending to the quality of the vine, and that's going to play into what we read eventually. "Every branch in me that bears no fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, so that it bears more fruit." So with the collective fruitfulness in mind, that means that the withered, atrophied, and dead and decaying branches, which are fruitless, can only contaminate the collective fruitlessness. Ergo, they must be identified and discarded, lest they compromise the fruitful totality of the fruit-bearing vine. And so the line in the sand, there is a line in the sand which exists between the fruitful branches and the unfruitful branches. The fruitful branches can be allowed to stay inasmuch as they contribute to the collective, but the withered and unfruitful branches, there's no place for them in the church or in the heaven to come. "You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you." Spiritually speaking, the Messiah's word has a hygienic effect, which cleans us of our sin and our spiritual contamination. And so we understand that his word is an agent of spiritual cleansing and wholeness. "Stay in me, and I in you. As the branch is unable to bear fruit of itself unless it stays in the vine, so neither you, unless you stay in me." So as branches, we have absolutely zero hope for producing fruitfulness apart from the vine from whom our fruitfulness is derived. And so if we stay in him, he will stay in us. He will meet us halfway. And if we take one step towards him, he'll take two steps towards you. But we are independently incompetent to produce our own spiritual fruit. As spiritual beings, we recognize that all spiritual blessings have their origin and fulfillment in the Messiah. Ergo, it is incumbent that we stay in him in order that he stays in us, in order to enable us to produce the most fruit that we are capable of bearing. "I am the vine, you are the branches. He who stays in me, and I in him, he bears much fruit, because without me you are able to do naught." So once more, he's reiterating the concept that we are independently incapable of bearing our own fruit. Ergo, any fruit we claim and possess and yield is wholly contingent on our union with him. So we are to remain connected to the source of our spiritual life. And so we have no hope or reasonable expectation to bear fruitfulness apart from him. "If anyone does not stay in me, he is thrown away as a branch and dries up, and they gather him and throw them into the fire, and they are burned." So with right reason and justifiable cause does the gardener retain the right and prerogative to discard the unfruitful branches which can only contaminate the collective fruitfulness. And the fire is very much analogous to hellfire. In other words, we can lose our salvation once we attain it. This ties us into the debate and argument over permanent assurance in one school of thought, which has no scriptural warrant, argues that once a Christian gets on their knees and declares themselves saved, they are saved for life, and there is nothing and no one that can take that from them. But the potential to apostatize or deviate from the straight and narrow is clearly palpable and a realistic risk which we take, and we have to bear in mind that we can lose the salvation we earned yesterday by departing from the straight and narrow today. If you stay in me, and my words stay in you, you shall ask whatever you want, and it shall be done for you. Now, this ought not be interpreted to the extreme as a carte blanche or a blanks check to any desire we want. It assumes that our requests will be righteous and commensurate with the will of the Father. Otherwise, we have no right reason or reasonable expectation to expect the fulfillment of our wishes. So this ties into the purpose of prayer, which is not to dictate our desires to divinity, but to discern his will and the courage to enact his will in all times and in all places. But his words and himself, his presence is inextricably connected to his words, so his words are an extension of himself, and his words bring us the benefit of his presence. In this my Father is esteemed, that you bear much fruit, and you shall be my disciples. So the Father's greatest joy and design and expectation is that we be fruitful, and in order to ensure our maximum fruitfulness, he must occasionally discard the branches which aren't bearing fruit, which collectively contaminate the collective fruitfulness. And this is in order that he may be esteemed, upheld, elevated, and honored. And disciple is a profound privilege and also a grave responsibility. So when we take upon ourselves the name of the Messiah, we bear the responsibility to bear spiritual fruitfulness, else we are effectively useless for him. As the Father has loved me, I have also loved you. Stay in my love. So his love is equated to an equality of essence with that which the Father bears for him, so too does he extend the same sentiment towards those he calls his own and admonishes them to remain and maintain his love. And his love is truly an irresistible force. Sadly, it can be resisted by the natural man, which is set on his own ways and determined to follow the dictates of their own heart. If you keep my commandments, you shall stay in my love, even as I have guarded my Father's commandments, and stay in his love. So the true test of love is marked by obedience to the commandments we receive and hear and study and are instructed to apply. And we have our perfect model in the Messiah, who perfectly obeyed his Father's commandments. And even though we all invariably fall short and are imperfect creatures, we do have the model, the perfect model, we can safely emulate and look to for one who did not fail. And obedience is a test of love because it often compels us to disobey ourselves. In other words, our immediate gratification and our natural desires and our selfish conceit and orientation. So and there are literally thousands of occurrences on a daily basis where our obedience will be put to test, but if we obey, that is very much a measuring mark of faith and a measuring mark and standard of love, which we may hopefully safely present ourselves to him by. These I have spoken to you, so that my joy might be in you, and that your joy might be complete. So the entire purpose for which he is delivering this discourse is to complete and fulfill their joy and and to make it complete and full. That means realize its full potential and make it a manifest fact in reality. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Now that's a pretty tall standard of order to emulate, the love which he bears us. There's really anything like it in the love that we can bear him or anyone else. Nevertheless, we do have his model, and this is a commandment. That means it's not open to negotiation, it's not subject to dispute, it is to be obeyed to literally and to the T. So we are not given a choice to love others, but are in fact commanded them to do so. No one has greater love than this, that one should lay down his life for his friends. Now, the spirit of self-sacrifice is ingrained in the Christian ethos, but we have to understand that the act of atonement by which he voluntarily assumed our sin penalty and gave his life and became sin in order to make the exchange whereby we could be judged as the righteousness of Elohim is a model we can emulate, but the effects of the phenomenon we can never hope to duplicate, because he alone was constitutionally capable of securing and purchasing our salvation. But this line has inspired the martyrs of every age. Now, why should we not voluntarily give our life and suffer willingly for him who suffered so willingly for us? And we can reflect and manifest in his love and perfect spirit of sacrificial love. So sacrifice is the supreme test and mark of love, and no more than we should desire to live without love should we desire to live without sacrifice. So the martyr's call extends to any generation, and we are to embrace and not circumvent the persecution which invites itself upon us as the natural response of the course of our walk. You are my friends if you do whatever I command you. Now, friends is an exalted station of equality compared to, as we read, servants, which indicates a subordinate station. And so friends are privileged to greater equality and more abundant revelations and greater spiritual gifts than mere servants, whose subordinate station denotes that they are in service of a master, but not his equal, and as such not privy to the fuller extent of revelatory information that the friends have access to and should by right exercise accordingly. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all which I heard from my Father I have made known to you. So they have everything they hear from the Son is derivative of the Father and carries the same equal authority. And he's privileging them with this information as an act of friendship, which is egalitarian in essence, whereas the servant and master is a subordinate and superior relationship. So as friends, we are privileged to the greater abundance and access to revelatory information according to which we need to know in order to act, in order to live life in a manner that is pleasing and befitting to the one who we call master. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and appointed that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he might give you. Now, there's a lot to digest here. We want to start by saying that our election was chosen before the foundation of the world and the councils of eternity. So even though at some a point in our lives, every converted Christian has had what appears to them to be a moment of election whereby they voluntarily submitted their lives to the Savior, but the Savior declares that that moment and that decision was decreed in advance of the event in the councils of eternity. And the purpose for which they are called and elevated and elected is to bear fruit, and the way that they do that is to remain connected and abiding in the vine, in his words, which is the Savior and the Father. And whatever we ask the Father in my name, now that implies that what is in his name is commensurate with his will, and so there's no room for selfish or conceited desires of immediate gratification. We may want the fancy car, but that's not going to benefit us eternally. Ergo, what the Father has in store for us, what he wants to give us, is greater than anything we can possibly imagine. And with that in mind, we're going to close the lesson today and pick up on this on the next time. Stay tuned till then. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.